Hi, everyone. This is Rama and Alex from Bloqcube. Today is our first of our webinars. This photograph was taken a few months back when we were together for the Galleon Prize nomination ceremony for startups. And our focus today in the webinar is to discuss how we can use technologies, new technology like AI and blockchain, in order to accelerate your clinical trials, even over 50% by deploying modern technologies. In today's session, we will cover it in two parts. I will be introducing Dr. Cahana in a minute, but fundamentally, the time has come that we have to find ways to improve our clinical trials operations processes, especially given the advent of new technologies. Going over 50% is what we have experienced in Bloqcube, and there's no reason why that cannot be expanded in the future. This is an industry that spends over $100 billion. This is growing at over 3%. And just the clinical trial systems market is almost $18 billion estimated by 2027. And even today, a lot of trials are still on paper and potentially Excel. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Rama from Bloqcube. I'm the CEO and founder. I come to Bloqcube after almost 28 years of experience in the pharma industry at Eli Lilly and Novartis. This included being the global head of clinical development finance for Novartis Oncology. And after we set up Bloqcube, I had the privilege and honor of leading critical discussions at various conferences all over. That has resulted in what we have built today as a structure for Bloqcube. Joining me is Dr. Alex Cahana, and Dr. Alex Cahana is an industry expert. Articles in LinkedIn and other places are read with fervor. He's a policy expert and has intimate links both with Africa as well as the general world of medicine and its applications with technology. And so with that, let me hand it over to Dr. Cahana. Thank you, Dr. Cahana, for joining us.
Thank you, Rama. And mostly I'm thankful for the decades-long friendship that we have between us going through this journey of applying these forward technologies for the betterment of the human race and humankind. So thank you so much. A little bit of background in my sense, as you mentioned, I've been a pain specialist for too many years, and I've practiced around the world, which is safe to say that not only do I speak many languages, but I'm familiar with firsthand experiences of how healthcare systems work. I've always been intrigued by technology integration in the clinical workflow and how that impacts the patient-physician dyad. I've been exclusively interested in decentralized technologies, which is the core technologies for what we'll talk later about Web3. And I've passed through winters, summers, springs, and all seasons in what pertains to blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and have the opportunity to work both in Africa, Latin America, recently in Asia and the Pacific Islands. You see, for example, behind me on the background, a beautiful island called the Satoshi Island, which is in the South Pacific, and the beautiful paradisiac country of Vanuatu, where we are experimenting with different co-living exercises in decentralized governance. And that is simply by the reason where I definitely believe that you cannot speak about mental health and physical health without speaking about planet health and financial health. And I hope that the audience will leave understanding the relevance and the context of this ever-changing world. I always found these conversations extremely interesting because we're juxtaposing two technologies, one that we love and one that at best we don't know what to think about and at worst hate. One is AI, which we love and fear. And especially since ChatGPT came out earlier last year, it has entered into the public's mainstream consciousness, even though it is a technology that's been in existence for a good 20, if not longer, years. And on the other hand, blockchain, which is mostly associated with fraud and with things that are not, helpful or desirable. And I hope that once we understand what it is, these distributed technologies and decentralized technologies, how that can actually change the way we interact with each other and the way we practice not only health, but also wellness. And I do not share the AI doomerism, although I've been a very adamant sci-fi ever since a child. Star Trek. Imagine this unified galaxies all working in harmony. I do think on what are the challenges as well as the opportunities that AI offers for the betterment of human condition. But it is clear to me that in order to safeguard and in order to really make sure that artificial intelligence or the intelligence that we think emerges from machines will actually serve to improve our life and not distract from it or destroy it. Now, I think that the most important thing is to understand what the context is of our conversation. And I think that if there's one thing that the post-COVID world has taught us is that we have trouble to trust each other. Misinformation, distrust, it has eroded our ability to cooperate, coordinate, and collaborate. And ever since the beginning of COVID, when we couldn't figure out how much toilet paper we have and what are the amount of ventilators and all this, we have noticed that there is a true problem in how we deal with data, who is the atomic component or fundamental ingredient in our digital world. And this pertains, of course, to all solutions, and clinical trials are one of many. And what I hope I will convince you is that the use of decentralized AI and the use of blockchain technology together with AI will actually solve this ability to, or inability to trust, and our inability to cooperate. Now, when people ask me what is blockchain, and there are a lot of ways to explain it, most people don't know how the internet works. I don't recall having conversations on how information packets are transferred and things of that sort, or how HTTP or TCP protocols work. It's just a digital interface between our physical world and a digital world that we do through a screen, and that's pretty much it. So in that vein, I would offer this explanation that blockchain or distributed ledger technology is simply the software solution to the problem of trust. That's basically it. So if I say, Rama, I am going to give you $20, I know I am me, you are you, and the $20 are $20. It is verifiable, it is final, and it is it. There won't be a double spend, there won't be a triple spend. It is simply a bookkeeping that is computationally trustworthy. And so when I talk about trust, I don't talk about, trust Alex, he seems like a nice guy and he seems like he knows what he's talking about. But actually, it is computational trust. So if anybody's really interested to kind of understand the underbelly of it, that, there is a transaction that is requested and then authenticated, and then there are cryptographic signatures that are all added to this in blocks of data, I invite them to peer at this slide. The easiest way to explain it to people who are not that interested or tech savvy enough to comprehend the robustness of this cryptographic solution is to say everybody uses to some extent Google Docs or Google Slides. And so if, Rama, you would ask me, please write your expenses of the day, then I would put down, this was $3 and this was $2 and this was $4, and just write down stuff on my ledger. But then I know that you're looking at it and people here in the audience is looking at it. So then I have to kind of be a little bit more accurate. I can't write $3 if it's just $2.95. And so suddenly you have the Hawthorne effect and we start to be a little more accurate in our input. And then at the end of the day, I summarize all the expenses and then everybody signs on it. So everybody checks, everybody validates, everybody verifies. And that signature is cryptographically closed and it can be revisited and audited and looked at. And so everybody can say, Rama, on July 25th at noon 15 Eastern time, signed this. And that is a block of data. And we do it on a Thursday, on a Friday, and on a Monday. And so we do it, and those blocks are connected in a chain. And the reason that they're connected in the chain is that if I come to the end of the week and I see that I overspent, I can't go back and fiddle with the works, go into the books and say, okay, you know what? Didn't turn out exactly as I wanted to. You wanted the book to be a little bit more effective. Maybe we can tinker a little bit with the numbers. Cannot be done. So it is not only auditable and time-stamped and immutable, what we call, that can't be changed, but also it is connected in a way that can show that it is tamper-proof. And so that is very important. And, I personally think of blockchain more as a time chain than anything else. Again, we're talking about computational trust. We are talking about data integrity. And so the data is encrypted, verified, final, time-stamped, transparent, immutable, and tamper-proof. And so if anybody's asking themselves why would we use this, I would suggest that you ask yourself, how is it that we're not doing this already? How come that is not? And the problem is, of course, on the data architecture, that right now the way we are doing it is we're doing it in centralized database that belong to data owners that have an invested agenda, that are tempted by censoring the data, by colluding on the data, by corrupting the data, and by decentralizing it and making it open and public. And there are ways, and I'll talk a little bit about it later in the conversation, there are ways ways of doing it while not disclosing sensitive data. Now, we are now in a time where we cannot even imagine that the data architecture will not be decentralized. And by the way, and I'll say this more than once because it's worth listening, that when you hear decentralized clinical trial management systems, they are not decentralized. They are virtual. They are imaginary. They are, let's do it for the decentralizations from the locus of the practice of the trial itself. They are not decentralized when it comes to architecture, structure of the data. So when I talked about decentralization, I mean it is a system like Bloqcube that uses blockchain technology. And the reason again is that decentralized technologies are security resistant. In other words, it is tougher to hack. It is easy to hack one account that has $1 billion in it and hack a billion accounts that have $1 in it. And so the structure of having decentralized nodes that are seen and protected make it resistant to hacks, and it makes it much more, as I explained earlier, resistant to collusion and to censorship. So we can't say, for example, I worry that we really expose how many people have COVID, I may not be reelected as governor of the state, then how about we change the number and fiddle with them? You cannot do it. So it's not like Google saying don't be evil. It's with blockchain, you can't be evil. Now, the second feature is really a feature of automation. We call it smart contracts, which in action are not really that smart. It's basically contracts that are coded. And the way I, again, explain it to people who are not really interested into the underbellies of how these are designed, if they are features that are legal and they're called Ricardian or not, it doesn't really matter. What it says basically is like a vending machine. I think a vending machine is the classic example of what a smart contract is. If I take a quarter or nowadays $2 and I put in it, in a Coke machine, I'm going to get one can of Coca-Cola. I'm not going to get a can of Coca-Cola if I pay only $1, and I'm not going to get a can of 7-Up just because I feel that I want to. So these smart contracts execute if, when, then certain conditions like parametric insurance or like any type of conditional algorithm allows it. And that not only automates and creates efficiencies, but then again decreases the possibility of corruption and collusion and double spending. And these are very, very important features to take into account. And I'm sure that already, without talking about clinical trials, the audience can appreciate how important these features are. Using a solution like Bloqcube means that it is disintermediated. There is no one in between the user and the researcher because everything is automated. It's just like I am the researcher and I am putting the $1 or $2 in the machine, and the machine takes out that result. It is an input-output interaction. And when we say it's trustless, it means that there's no need for an intermediate to trust. There's no need for someone standing in between me and the machine to verify that I am who I am and that the $2 are actually $2. Why? Because there is that mathematical computational trust in it. It is complete, it is deterministic, and it is fine. And these smart contracts, of course, can be way more complex than just getting one can of Coke. It can do multiple things, can do under different conditions, different outputs. But in essence, it is not very different, the contract itself, than just writing a simple email that says, Rama, I would kindly ask you to invite me to give this talk under these conditions for this amount of time. And for that, I would like 50 likes and 20 clapping hands when I'm done. And that's it. And there's no incomplete contract. There's no need for arbitrage. There's no need to try and think of all these different scenarios where human behavior kind of like imposes themselves and we have to do approximations to what we intended to do. I think that one of the most important things that has come out of the blockchain technology is this word of tokens that is different, by the way, by AI tokens. The tokens that we mention in AI is simply words. It is a definition that has been done decades before the use of the word tokens in blockchain technology. In AI, we say, okay, I use this mathematical representation or this digital representation of that word, and that is a token. And then the generative AI or whatever ChatGPT will guess, according to the input of the word, what would be the next word that would come out. When we talk about tokens in blockchain, what we mean is that we are gathering all this data and we are digitally representing it and attributing it to value. And so, for example, this is a list of different types of tokens, and you can see that it's color-coded. So, for example, there's a token that talks about very private things, my name, my address, my date of birth, my utility, things like that. And that is why I don't want it out there. And it is worth a lot of money. It is worth a lot of money for me to receive if I sell it to someone, but it's also worth a lot of money for someone someone to steal it if they wish. And then there are things that are public. People can go into the DMV and look at my license or go in to see what homes I bought or whatever. And these are purchases and debits and loan payments and whatnot. And so there are different values. And the idea of tokenization, and when I mention tokenization, it's just basically saying I want to collect data that represents your actions and put them together and attach them value. And the reason that I want to do that is that when I can give value to your actions, it means also that I can exchange them with others and I can trade.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, the situation that exists is that we are excluded from that economic activity. You mentioned the hundreds of billions of dollars is going into the clinical trial management economy. And what are patients doing? What are they getting from it? They're not participants. They're not equal participants. They're an afterthought. Why don't the payers give me, or sponsors, I'll give you like some brownie points. I'll maybe give you, some things that are fractions of pennies to the billions of dollars that it is. And that is at best not okay. And at worst, simply not sustained. To my point, when we talk about the economy of tokens, tokenomics, we are talking about containerizing data. And when we containerize that data, we attribute value to it, we can exchange it, we can trade with it. And so in that sense, we can encourage people to adhere. One of the problems, of course, in clinical trials is that there's no adherence to the protocol. And why would there be? The stakes couldn't have been lower for me to participate in something that you're making tons of money on and I'm not seeing anything from it. I can discourage fraudulent activity by any of the people that are in the value chain of that clinical trial. And of course, I can also govern it. I can vote for it. I can have a voice and say, yes, we want to know as patients advocates, as people who are involved in this ecosystem, researchers, affiliates, we can decide ourselves how do we want to run these trials. And this is the concept that we all call a DeSci, decentralized science. And so clinical trial management is just one part of this whole context of a decentralized science where, for example, you look at publications. What does the publication industry look like? It looks like, okay, how about I come up with my work, with my ideas, I put it all out there, and a publisher says, sure, pay me and I'll print it. And then when I make money on it, I keep everything and you get nothing. How is that a good deal? Again, not ethical, which is fine because capitalism at best is amoral, but it's also not sustainable. And that's why we see so much fraud, because there is no tokenomics to discourage entry of fraudulent publications into the ecosystem. So I hope that people are starting to get a feel of, oh, wow, maybe this blockchain and crypto and all these things that we read every day, and even today in the New York Times, back from 2016, to continue and subliminally convince people that decentralization is bad. And all we have to do is just trust in the government to do the right thing for it. And so the real problem of life sciences and healthcare is the problem of data illiquidity. There are databases out there, and there is a not only lack of interoperability, there is a lack of intercooperability. There is no reason for us to share our data. On the contrary, there are reasons not to share that data and to sit on it. But like data is like electricity. If it doesn't move, it provides no energy and provides no benefit. So what we are doing is solving the problem of data illiquidity and creating business models for intercooperability, which is something that, you are one of the few realm of technologists that I know that actually talk about it and actually talk not only about the clinical trial management system, but the clinical trial management financial systems. You need to have that move. Having a lot of tokens is a good thing. When people say, why are there so many coins out there? That's the equivalent of someone saying, oh, why are there so many websites out there? Of course, there'll be websites out there. Some websites are great. Some websites are dangerous. Some websites are stupid. And that's fine. Just be careful if you go into a dangerous website, and don't be surprised that you'll be hacked and you'll put a virus. And so there are good tokens, there are bad tokens, and there are stupid tokens. And there are people that want to use tokens to collect baseball cards or I don't know what, then that's fine. I have nothing against that. Mm-hmm. But this allows a seamless 24/7, 365 transfer of data. Because every time I mention dollar, I can also use the word data. It is a transfer of value. And the internet now has moved from the internet of data to the internet of value. And that is why we have different types of tokens and different type of coins, which the difference is technical and not really that important for this conversation. But these can be for exchange. These can be for utility and work. These can be for money worth, all these different things. And like I said, dangerous ones and stupid ones. And both of them are very, very useful, especially in places that do not have infrastructure and have difficulties like in emerging markets and developing economies. So when do we use, or where can we use blockchain in healthcare and life sciences? So from easy to hard, the easiest thing was when we said, okay, where's the toilet paper and then where's sanitizer and where's the ventilator? Put it on the supply chain. Figure out who does what where and who frauds during it, and find out, oh, wow, all that has been hacked at some, point in when the distributor or maybe in the manufacturing. It is clear why people see the utility of automating and taking out the human factor and human fallibility from the supply chain. And the supply chain can be also with data. So revenue cycle management, claims contracting, the whole government is using it, but they do not want the decentralized governance structure. They just want the disintermediation. They just want to keep the data in silo for themselves. But yes, it is very strong automating, disintermediating, trustless technology. Where it starts to be interesting in decentralized clinical trial management is because we have people in it. So it's not just tracking stuff and tracking people, but it's also, governing the data. And that is where it's so exciting and where a solution like yours is so important. And obviously, electronic health records are very important. And there are decentralized electronic health records out there in the world, in Asia, in Africa. Of course, not in the United States, because the United States is a monopoly of electronic health records, right? Five companies control 80% of the markets. The rest of the 1,245 are fighting on 20% of the market. But for me, of course, the magic is to decentralize governance of people. That's why when you see the Satoshi Island and the beautiful paradise in Vanuatu, we can actually live in a cooperative environment where we want to invest in the commons. What does that have to do with AI? And I'm getting towards the end of my talk, but just to give it. So I hope that I convinced you that decentralization is good, centralization is bad. And there are different versions of it. So centralized capitalism, bad. Centralized, good. Centralized communism, bad. Decentralized communism, good. It's like anything you want. It's like decentralized internet, good. So you get it. But what does that have to do with AI? And of course, AI, in the most simplest of things, is an input of data that has multiple layers to it. And it doesn't matter if now it's machine learning or deep learning or reinforcement learning or transformers now with ChatGPT. I can give a whole talk about that. But it's basically taking and fractionalizing an image or text or whatnot into data points and weighing those data points and having an output. And they do it very, very well. The architectures now are very, very sophisticated. However, they are centralized. They are black box. They are hidden. There are some companies that are trying to do decentralized and create their knowledge base on crowdsourcing and all that, which is great. But OpenAI is not open and it is closed. Just like, when you do something that is like healthy, organic, I don't know what, then you know that it's not healthy and it's not organic. So the point being is that AI is a tool. It is a derivative tool, and we can have a separate conversation if ever it'll be smarter than me. That depends on what do you define smart. But the point is that blockchainizing or decentralizing AI is a must. And why does it do it? Because you can follow the provenance of the data. So beyond the encryption and the computational trust and making it secure and making it, less hackable by the decentralization, you can actually follow the provenance. There are a lot of assumptions that are built into it. There are a lot of what we call biases that are systemic in it. And of course, when there's lack of data, they hallucinate. And so, we can reduce it and fine tune it and tinker around it. Or, for example, do the right thing and open it up and make a decentralized model. And again, large language models are the flavor du jour. But I can tell you by the end of this year or next year, it won't be that. It'll be world language models. It'll be language action models. It will be nature action models. This is all moving extremely fast. What does that have to do with federated learning? Well, again, federated learning is, the next step of artificial intelligence and machine learning. It is where there are different players that are creating their own models. An intelligence that is developed in a community hospital is very different than the models that are developed from the research that is done in a medical center or a treatment center. And so all this, I'm sure that you can appreciate the importance of not only the data being decentralized, encrypted, tamper-proof, auditable, and all the things that we mentioned, but also the smart contracts that can automate flow and the digestion of that data and the tokenomics, the tokens and the tokens. I hope that I'm convincing you that it creates better data government and, like I said before, new ways to intercooperate. And if you don't know what the word coopetition and stigmergy means, is because you do not know how to cooperate cooperate because we live in an extractive model. So co-opetition means collaborative, competitive collaboration, that we can collaborate even though we are not friends because it is better for us to work together. But in the non-extractive model, and stigmergy is a natural phenomenon that exists with plants and with mushrooms and mycelium, and where ecosystems work and feed off each other. And the exact term is indirect coordination. And so, for example, the fact that I'm talking here with you and there are people that are listening to it, they are benefiting from that. So even though I don't see them, we have created a business relationship. And someone might call me and say, Alex, I've been so inspired by what you said. Oh my God, can we do something together? And so you cannot talk about in the Web3, which is the web of ownership. We say Web 1, remember the times when it started in the 90s? I was just like, it was just read only. I just read it. And I'm like, why am I looking at the screen reading the New York Times when I have the New York Times next to me? And then Web 2 is what we're living right now. Read and write. You can upload, download. There's some interaction, but it's not real. And Web 3 is read, write, own. I own pieces of the internet. So not everything goes to Musk and to Zuck, but a little bit to me. And so that Web3 that we live in, when I start to be an eventually equal participant as a creator of knowledge in the internet of knowledge, you understand that this is not just blockchain. It is not just decentralized AI. That there are other things like privacy in depth, where we can actually look at data in transition without disclosing things that we feel we do not want to disclose. But I just want to give people the idea that if you are working with a system of clinical trial management, that the data is centralized, that are not using privacy in depth technology, that are not using decentralized AI, it is, how we say in French, caduc. It is old stuff. How will this change the way we do things? Of course, peer-to-peer, there's less waste, less fees, less capital leakage. There'll be better data analytics because there are new ways to crowdsource our intelligence, new ways to increase or augment our knowledge base, our epistemic base that we have, but also self-ownership of the contributors. And every one of us is a contributor to the internet of knowledge. We are consumers of knowledge. We are the curators of knowledge because we say, I like this and I don't like that. And we are the creators of new knowledge. And it rewards us for behavior. And when I do things that are praiseworthy, I am rewarded for it. And if I do things that ruin the system, I will be discouraged from doing it. We are moving where we are transforming everyone, patients, participants, beneficiaries, from this being health service users to health and wealth producers. And so data is not just capital to make things work. Data is dignified labor. And that's really what's important here. And if there's one thing that I want people to remember is that when a third party takes your data without your permission or with some type of, I don't know what, informed consent that on page 47 in font 3, it says that it doesn't belong to you, they are using, losing, and abusing you because you are your data. And your data is the representation of your dignity. And I'll stop with this. These are the wonderful women of the AI Center of Excellence from Nairobi that we've developed. Smart, progressive, and the future of the world, where they understand that my data are my fundamental human rights and the creation of the data are labor rights. So I want to thank you for this opportunity. And I'm open to any questions or any further conversation on the topic. Thank you.
Blockchain has unfortunately been conflated with crypto. And people have really looked at blockchain as being only crypto. And if you look at the technology of distributed ledger, it is far more powerful than what people think. So here is the results of Boehringer Ingelheim, which did a proof of concept using a blockchain technology-based system for what is called informed consent. This is a very detailed process that takes place before somebody signs up for a trial. And what you see over here is they had almost a 90% plus decrease, both in terms of time as well as in terms of costs. Now, while we can argue that a POC may not be replicable, it just shows what Dr. Cahana has been alluding to, that the world can be an oyster if you go about it the right way. The clinical trial world is suffused with examples of what is called decentralized clinical trials. Alex had already talked about what DCT as is known today is not true DC, but let's keep that going for a moment because the FDA has also issued guidelines on what DCT is. And what you see see over here is a very fine effort done by Medable, who's one of the leaders in electronic clinical systems, Tufts University's Center for the Study of Drug Development, to assess what would happen if a trial would have been done by the DCT processes as we know of today. And what they showed is that if it was a phase 2 trial, there's almost a possibility of having a benefit of almost $8 to $9 million. And when we get to a phase 3 trial, that can go as high as $32 million. And I would encourage anybody on this session to both read the article that we alluded to over here, done by the leader in the area of clinical trials research, Dr. demystifies, as well as the team from Medable who participated in building this. Medable put out a paper actually called Evidence and Insights related to this very recently, which I'd encourage people also to read to get a sense of where the industry is. The FDA has also stepped into the fray. Some years back, the FDA put out a request of how to use blockchain for the tracking of pharmaceutical products in line with new legislation that had come out. Subsequently, post-COVID, issuing guidelines on what are the do's and don'ts when you're working with decentralized clinical trials, so that people have a level playing field and also understand what is expected. More recently, they've gone one step further. They've talked about data integrity in BA/BE studies. And within these guidelines, there is a very subtle phrase that what is applied for BA/BA would also expand and apply for all studies. Dr. Cahana in his earlier session talked about all the other elements of what a blockchain delivers. And he talked about how the chain is a time chain where people cannot fudge or cannot change what has been in the past. And this is the essence of data integrity. There have been a couple of issues where data integrity has been questionable. Very often people are using multiple systems and there's a lack of real-time data. And in addition to what I talked about data integrity, sites payments and doctors payments, especially in the US, are delayed. So Bloqcube was looking at this from an innovative way and said this could be one area where true decentralized software in blockchain would have an impact. And we built a system around it which runs on the desktop, runs everywhere because it's in the cloud, and it is anchored with a distributed engine. And that also reduces the vulnerability to ransomware attacks. We used the system with a customer who was doing an observational diabetes study with 150 patients. Now, the original study had 850 patients, and the protocol called for that to be done within 12 months. They gave us carved out 150 patients, and we were able to use Bloqcube system, and it was covered within 12 days. It delivered data with integrity, with quality, with geolocation, with real time, and the testimonials will be shown in a moment. It was a trailblazer at its time. Because going back to what Dr. Cahana said at the early stage, until we can get people whose data is used for clinical trials to truly own the data, it's not really a question of clinical trials using their data. It's a question potentially of their data being exploited by others in this whole process. Similarly, we use the system for a community cancer health screening camp. And again, they're working with paper and Excel, and they were looking at our system. And what made the doctors and the paramedical staff there was their ability to see the actual processing taking place of patients in real time as they're being screened for various issues. Bloqcube has also had a virtual certification and validation done by Health Innovation Technology Labs, which is part of Columbia Business School, which looked at a lot of factors before they pronounced their validation of us. In that observational diabetes study, there was a geotag, and the geotagging within the limits of patient privacy allows the physician or anybody supervising a trial to look at clusters also and do cluster analysis if required, if they feel that there is an issue that has to be resolved in a geographical cluster. In this case, as it was an observational diabetes study, they were also keeping their eye out for any issues of adverse events which they had categorized, which included diabetic neuropathy or diabetic retinopathy. All stages, they wanted to be sure that informed consent had been signed before data had been obtained from the patient. Otherwise, in their normal world, they'll have to invalidate that data and restart the whole process. On the right is the dashboard that came out of the community health screening clinic, which was a real-time exercise in terms of the structure. And these are the screens where our client was in Texas, their client was in the Northeast, and the study was taking place in Asia Pacific. And the screens, the dashboard, the structure was being run on different platforms. And here are some of the testimonials that came out. Sponsor said we could exchange ideas. The regulator said it was all well sealed. To the physician, investigator said it was easy to use the software and didn't require major workflow changes. And the monitor especially was saying that they could monitor it on on a daily basis. And this made a huge difference also for their real-time work. This is how the ecosystem looks like for our system, where modules are present and we can now detach and use any module. The beauty of a blockchain-based engine is that from an audit perspective, it is very rigorous. It is easy to retrieve the data. It is easy to view it. And more importantly, it is easy to implement. Are there anybody else who is working on the area of blockchain? Here we have got two perspectives. One is from a leading venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, and they talk about it. It's what Dr. Cahana talked about, the algorithmic trust, the computational trust. That is what is being delivered through it. That is the essence of also this article that came out in Lancet in Digital Health. Our system has been looked at by various bodies. Vendor evaluation by CB Insights has shown that we have got lead ahead of others. We also had good recognition. The Galleon Prize Foundation stood as one of the best startup nominees since for 2 years in a row. And more recently this year, we also were a finalist in the clinical trials technology portion of a startup pitch competition done by Summit for Clinical Operations Executives. So we are driving this innovation using our system. And we are doing this not as technologists looking for a pain point or a nail to be hammered into place, but a group of powerful and very experienced domain experts, which I think is our unseen competitive advantage, where we know where the issues are and we choose the technology tools to make it work. It's a very extensive group of advisors, and we have people represent different parts of it. Bloqcube is one of the very innovative B2B web-based platforms. While we are delivering an end-to-end solution for small, mid-sized CROs and sites, we are encompassing using the blockchain all the elements of data integrity, data immutability, and smart contracts to integrate even finance into the whole process. Keep in mind that if you want to have quality AI, it requires quality data. And as part of that process, you need to have quality systems. I would like to thank everybody who has joined us on this call for an engaging discussion with some really thought-provoking points of view expressed by Dr. Cahana. Take care.